In 1590, John White returned to Roanoke Island, expecting to find his family, his friends, his entire colony thriving. Instead, he found an empty settlement, perfectly preserved, yet utterly devoid of human life. Not a single person, all gone. What happened to over 100 men, women, and children who simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind only one cryptic clue scratched into a wooden post? Was it a massacre, a supernatural event, or a betrayal so profound it has haunted history for over 400 years? To unravel this chilling enigma, we must journey back to 1587, to the ambitious dreams of Sir Walter Raleigh and his fervent desire to establish England's first permanent settlement in the New World. Raleigh, a favorite of Queen Elizabeth I, envisioned a prosperous colony that would serve as both a trading post and a strategic outpost against the Spanish. His first attempt in 1585, largely a military expedition led by Sir Richard Grenville, was fraught with conflict with the local CROATOAN tribe and ultimately abandoned after a year. But Raleigh was not deterred. He recalibrated, deciding that the next venture, the 1587 expedition, would be different. This wouldn't be a temporary military camp. It would be a true colony, families, craftsmen, and farmers, aimed at self-sufficiency and peaceful coexistence. He appointed John White, an accomplished artist and a veteran of the 1585 expedition, as governor. White was no stranger to the New World, having meticulously documented its flora, fauna, and indigenous peoples in stunning watercolors. He knew the risks, but also saw the immense potential. The plan was deceptively simple: establish the colony on Chesapeake Bay, a harbor far superior to Roanoke Island. However, a manipulative ship's pilot, Simon Fernandez, had other ideas. Fernandez, whose motivations remain debated to this day, intentionally dropped the colonists off at the site of the previous failed settlement on Roanoke Island, claiming it was too late in the season to sail further north. This deviation was catastrophic. Roanoke was isolated, marshy, and less fertile, a place already scarred by hostilities with the local tribes due to Grenville's previous actions. They were stranded, over 100 souls, including John White's daughter, Eleanor Dare, and her husband, Ananias. Eleanor was pregnant, and just weeks after their arrival, she would give birth to Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas. This tiny new life, a beacon of hope, would soon become entwined in one of history's greatest and most unsettling disappearances. The initial weeks were tumultuous. The colonists found the remnants of the earlier fort and hastily began repairs and construction. But the ghost of past conflicts loomed large. A colonist was killed by a Native American war party while crabbing alone in the Sound, a stark reminder of their precarious position. The colonists, recognizing their vulnerability and limited resources, immediately implored Governor White to return to England for supplies and reinforcements. White, torn between his duty as governor and his paternal instincts, reluctantly agreed, leaving his daughter, granddaughter, and the entire colony in the hands of fate. His departure was meant to be temporary, a quick round trip. He promised to return within months, ideally by the following spring. He never imagined it would be 3 agonizing years. England at the time was embroiled in a life-or-death struggle against the Spanish Armada. Every available ship and sailor was conscripted for the defense of the realm. White's attempts to leave port were repeatedly thwarted. Storms, piracy, and naval blockades kept him captive in England. His pleas for assistance from Sir Walter Raleigh fell on deaf ears, overshadowed by the larger conflict. The Spanish threat finally abated in 1588, but still, delays mounted. It wasn't until August of 1590 that John White finally secured passage on a privateering expedition and made his way back to Roanoke. Imagine the terror, the gnawing dread that must have consumed him during those 3 long years. He had left his entire world behind, vulnerable and exposed, on a remote island on the edge of the known world. When White's ship finally anchored near Roanoke, he and his landing party were met with an unnerving silence. As they approached the settlement, they blew trumpets and called out familiar names, but the only response was the echoing cry of gulls and the rhythmic lapping of waves against the shore. The settlement was eerily intact, yet utterly deserted. The houses were still standing, some partly dismantled, suggesting a planned rather than sudden departure. There was no sign of a struggle, no bodies, no blood. It was as if the inhabitants had simply vanished. The palisade, a defensive wall built around the colony, was still in place, but ominously a message had been carved into one of the main posts, CROATOAN. And a little further on a nearby tree, the letters CROW were etched. These were the only clues. White had established a contingency plan with the colonists before his departure. If they were to move, they were to carve the name of their new destination into a tree or post. If they were in distress, they were to add a Maltese cross above the carving. Crucially, there was no cross. This suggested that their departure, while perhaps urgent, was not forced, not violent. CROATOAN was the name of a nearby island, now known as Hatteras Island, inhabited by a friendly Native American tribe. Perhaps they had sought refuge there, assimilated with the CROATOANs, or journeyed inland. White, desperate for answers, wanted to sail immediately to CROATOAN Island. But fate once again intervened with cruel precision. A violent hurricane struck, scattering the ships and making any immediate further exploration impossible. Several cables snapped, anchors were lost, and a squall forced the ships to abandon the search and return to England, leaving White to grapple with an unbearable loss and an unyielding mystery. He never saw his family or any of the colonists again. The disappearance of the lost colony of Roanoke remains one of America's most compelling cold cases. The CROATOAN clue has fueled centuries of speculation. One prominent theory suggests that the colonists, facing famine and hostile tribes, indeed migrated to CROATOAN Island and integrated with the Hatteras Native Americans. Archaeological digs on Hatteras Island have unearthed 16th-century English artifacts, including part of a slate writing tablet and a 10-carat gold signet ring with the crest of the Kendall family, a name prominent among the Roanoke colonists. This material evidence strongly supports the assimilation theory, suggesting a peaceful, albeit desperate, integration rather than a violent end. Another theory posits that a different group of Native Americans attacked the colony. The Lost Colony play, performed annually in North Carolina, dramatizes a massacre by the local Powhatans. However, the lack of bodies or widespread destruction at the site contradicts this brutal scenario. There's also the unlikely, yet often whispered, theory of cannibalism, driven by desperate starvation, a dark fantasy fueled by the harsh realities of early colonial life, but again with no direct evidence. More recently, some historians suggest the colonists may have split into smaller groups, attempting to survive in various locations, with some potentially moving inland to establish settlements, perhaps even near present-day Bertie County, North Carolina, where maps from the era show a possible fort and settlement. This Site X theory is bolstered by subtle corrections on a known map made by John White himself, hinting at an inland fort far from Roanoke. John White died in obscurity, his final years consumed by the haunting question of his family's fate. He passed away never knowing what truly became of his daughter and granddaughter. To this day, the story of the lost colony continues to captivate, a chilling parable of human vulnerability in the unforgiving wilderness. Modern archaeological efforts, leveraging advanced ground-penetrating radar and DNA analysis of local Native American tribes, continue to chip away at the mystery, slowly piecing together fragments of a brutal puzzle. We may never unearth the full, undeniable truth of what happened on that remote island. More than 4 centuries later, the wind still whispers through the empty site of Roanoke, carrying with it the unspoken secrets of over 100 souls who simply vanished, leaving behind only that one enduring cryptic word, CROATOAN. And perhaps that's how some mysteries are meant to remain, a chilling reminder of the unknown, an open loop in the annals of history, forever beckoning us to wonder.